Outspoken Whole Foods CEO John Mackey is no stranger to controversy. Remember his 2009 Wall Street Journal op-ed calling for Obamacare repeal. Well, he's back at it. This time he said Obamacare is worse than socialism. It might even be fascism. Well, let's welcome an old friend to the show, Whole Foods Market co-CEO and co-founder John Mackey. And he's the author of the new book, Conscious Capitalism, Liberating the Heroic Spirit of Business. Fellow free market man, John Mackey, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. I don't really care that much, but you backed off the term fascism. Can you just tell our viewers why?
The word is it's got too much baggage to it. It brings up associations with Germany and Italy and Spain back in World War II. So people aren't able to look at that word in any kind of objective fashion. So now I'm just saying that we have government-controlled health care. That seems rather obvious and doesn't get people so upset.
Right. Is it actually a kind of socialism light or let's say a Western European-style socialism?
No, I don't think so, because socialism, the government owns the means of production, and the means of production will still be nominally in the hands of private enterprise, but government will tell it what to do, what it can't do, so it'll direct it, it'll control it.
What's your biggest criticism of Obamacare?
It's not free enterprise capitalism. I believe in free enterprise capitalism. I believe it's lifted humanity out of poverty. It's created great progress in the last 200 years where markets are allowed to work. It's a more innovative, robust, resilient system. I think you can have that and create a safety net to make sure that poor people are also taken care of. I think you can have the best of both worlds, and that's what I would prefer. And that's what I've written about in my book.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is that the basic message of conscious capitalism?
The basic message of conscious capitalism is that business has the potential to have a higher purpose, and that you should manage the business on behalf of all the stakeholders, create win-win-win-win philosophy.
And let me just ask, what does it do to you? What does it do to the capitalist system and to Whole Foods? You have these government interventions, these government regulations, these government taxes and mandates and so forth. How does the system absorb that and resolve itself over these kinds of problems?
Well, it doesn't really resolve it. The further you move away from freedom and allowing the markets to work and innovation to occur, then the less markets are allowed to work their magic, and so it's. I just believe there are better alternatives. I oftentimes urge people to look at what Switzerland's doing, but. Let's talk about conscious capitalism, Larry. I think business has a very bad reputation in the world. It's often portrayed as basically all about selfishness and greed and exploitation. And yet business is the greatest value creator in the world. Business creates value for its customers, for its employees, for its suppliers, for its investors, and for the larger communities it's part of. Business is heroic, and yet the narrative about business has been hijacked by the critics and the enemies of business who want to put it in this narrow box of basically just seeing as selfish and greedy and only caring about money.
Well, we hear, from certain people who go unnamed, we have sort of fat cat bankers and we have billionaires and millionaires that are corrupting the system and that you didn't create that business. I mean, that's the kind of thing you hear. What's your reaction when you hear that stuff?
Well, business is oftentimes judged by its worst practitioners. There are some bad business people out there who are selfish and greedy, and you've got the Enrons of the world, and you've got the Bernie Madoffs. But unfortunately, business is tainted by the worst actions of a few, and we don't do the same thing with doctors. There are bad doctors out there, and there's bad politicians out there. There's bad journalists out there, Larry, and yet we don't judge them by the worst of their practitioners. Business, though, is tarred and feathered by its very worst practitioners. We want to recapture the narrative about the goodness of business, the potential for business to create value in the world. We really think that business is a great value creator, and that if we can recapture the narrative and let business people begin to see themselves as heroic rather than as the bad guys, the world will be a much better place.
Let me just ask you, your Whole Foods, John, you've had a great run. You've had a fabulous run. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, even in the past year, your stock is up 16%. I just want to ask you before we leave, how is business right now? Are consumers consuming? Are your stores full? How do you assess the whole business economic situation?
Business is good for Whole Foods. It's been good our entire existence. We've seen steady growth. We're a $12 billion company now, 73,000 team members. So we've continued to expand and grow. So I think we're doing okay.
All right. Many thanks, John Mackey. I appreciate it very much, sir.
Thanks, Larry.